Got his name up?
Yeah, I'll put it once we start.
Nice, huh?
Good afternoon. This is State Representative Robert Martwick, and I'm coming to you from the Capitol in Springfield, Illinois. And I'm joined today for my latest Springfield update by my colleague to the east, Representative Jaime Andrade.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your update. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us to discuss some of these issues. So, first of all, very happy holiday weekend to everyone. I hope you enjoy the weekend with all of your friends and family, and you have a very safe and happy weekend. Memorial Day weekend has meant something very different to me ever since I was elected to the legislature 7 years ago. Many people don't realize that our weekend, holiday weekend, has either been non-existent or,
Right.
in this instance, very short. So we're going to have one day off. So we're in session today. We'll be in session Sunday and Monday. We will have one day off Saturday to visit with our families. But there's a very important reason for that. We have a budget deadline on May 31st, and
That's
we're
right.
trying to get all of the way Springfield works is we file all these bits of legislation, and the process is they whittle down until the most important ones are left, and we pass them all towards the end. It's just the way the process works. It's the way it's supposed to work, and it generally does work quite well, actually. But there's a lot to do yet, and I wanted to give you an update and give you an idea of what some of the big things we're still working on. So with that, let's talk about some of the bills that are still pending before the General Assembly.
We are.
So number one, and I think this is probably the biggest initiative that's still out there, is the Fair Tax Initiative.
Which you're the chief sponsor.
I am the chief sponsor of the initiative. It's something that I campaigned on 7 years ago. I knocked on doors. I talked to people. I've done a lot of work on this issue, and it's something that I feel strongly about. And so, that has really been coming to a head. It's been passed in the Senate. It's here in the House. If it passes in the House, then we will move to. And this is different than most pieces of legislation. Most pieces of legislation, once they pass both chambers, go to the governor's office for signature or approval or veto, as the case may be. But with this is a constitutional amendment to allow us to have a fair tax. And so it won't be us who decide.
Right.
It won't be the governor who decides. It will be the voters. It'll be the people.
Voters back home.
That's right. And so this amendment, if we pass it here in Springfield, then it will appear on the November 2020, the presidential election. It will appear on the ballot, and the voters of Illinois will get to decide whether or not we keep the current flat tax system that we have, that I would argue is broken and antiquated, or if we reform our system to give, to solve our financial problems and give a little bit of relief to middle class, working class, and poor taxpayers. We're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Are we doing also the rates right now? Or
we are. So there's two components to this. We're going to pass the constitutional amendment, which is what I'm carrying, and then our chairman of revenue, Representative Zaleski, is carrying the rates bill that will set out the rates that, if it's passed, if the voters approve the amendment, then this will be the rate structure that we have.
Right. So it's an if and only bill.
If and only, that's correct. Number two, and this is something that's important, because the fair tax, if passed, we would see no additional revenue from that until 2021. So we still have to get through 2020, and so we have to do a budget now, and we have a large structural deficit. So
Right.
we've been working.
Right. Even though we did receive a little bit more revenue this year than the past, right?
Yes. So there was what they call an April surprise. There was
Right.
additional revenues that were unanticipated, which is going to help us with the budget issues. But really, what it did more than anything else, what a lot of people say, is the governor had intended originally to.
Pension holiday.
Well,
Was it?
wasn't really a pension holiday, but he was trying to restructure the pension payment. But it would have been a lesser payment, and now we're going to ensure that we make a full payment on pensions. But that eats up the entirety
entirety of
this
it.
windfall. So it doesn't relieve the pressure on education or higher education or human services and other debt reduction. So we still have a lot of work to do to find ways to do it. Now, there are a lot of a lot of revenue proposals out there. Some of them are tied to some of the other issues that we see,
Right.
on our list up here. We've got gaming and sports betting, and if that were to pass,
Right.
we would levy a fee on that. So there
Mm-hmm.
would be license fees, and then there would be taxes levied on those, so that we would get revenue. But unless they pass,
Right.
then there's no revenues. Same thing with recreational cannabis. But in the meantime, there are some other revenue measures that have been proposed, and it's a lot of talk of the town, right? I mean, I think people in Illinois
For the specifically for the budget or for more the capital too.
well, there's a lot of different things that have been proposed, right? So we've got in order to close the budget hole, there have been a number of ideas that have been proposed. Most of which I'm not a big fan of. I'm a big believer in making our tax system more fair, and I think some of these are regressive. They make our tax system less fair, and they fall on the backs of the people that you and I
The liquor
represent.
tax, the liquor tax, cigarette tax that they're proposing.
They're looking at a statewide plastic bag tax, which wouldn't affect the residents of the city of Chicago.
Right.
We already have it, but the rest of the state would then be subject to this. There have been talks of levying a tax on streaming services such as Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu or whatever streaming service you might use. And again, I think that these are things that fall disproportionately on working and middle class people. I don't think it's the right way to go about it.
Right.
But
I agree with you.
we have to look at the trade-off right now, because we're faced with some pretty devastating cuts again to services. So everyone gets to weigh in on this. It's not a decision that Representative Andrade and I will make, but it's a decision that we will be a part of, right? So people from all over the state are going to have to come together and decide what is going to fix those financial problems for us. But I feel good about it. I think I can say almost with certainty that I think that we will have a budget this year, and that will be a
Yes,
balanced
that I
budget.
agree.
Will be done right. It will not be the irresponsible problems that we've had in the past, where we've failed to pass a budget, like we did under Governor Honor. I think under Governor Pritzker, we will get this budget passed, and it will be done right. It's never perfect. That's government,
and
but I think it'll be
he
good.
is working with the legislature, and that's the biggest difference. He is working with the legislature. The other governor did not work with the legislature. He thought we worked for him.
Right.
That's the difference. That's
Yeah.
one of the big differences. He thought we worked for him.
Yeah.
We
it
work
is-
for the people, and we work together as a group.
Yeah, it's a very different approach. So let's talk about a couple of the other ones. Obviously, we have gaming and sports betting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there are proposals, of course, and this is always a challenging thing, right? Because gaming proposals, I've watched them. So I've been down here 7 years, and I've never seen one pass. But I've been watching them for 10 years,
And they
and I've
blow
never
up.
seen one pass. There's just so many different interests that get involved here. So we've got, with gaming, there are proposals to expand casinos, and of course, Mayor-elect Lightfoot and I think most of the elected officials in the city of Chicago are begging for a Chicago casino to give them some relief with their financial problems. But then there are other places. The city of Waukegan wants a casino.
Right.
The south suburbs want a casino. So there's a lot of people saying, well, if we're going to do this, we've got to make sure that my community gets something out of it. But as a part of it, there is this nationwide trend now to allow online sports gaming, to wager on.
And that's our sports betting.
Yeah, to wager on baseball games and football games and golf and whatever it might be, but allow people to wager, and there are there is sports wagering permitted in landlocked casinos right now.
Right.
But this would expand it, and it would allow internet access to it, so that would allow the likes of FanDuel and what's the other one called, DraftKings, to establish a market presence here in Illinois. And then there's much consternation about that. But you know what? We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later. So let's run through the rest of the list here. We've got recreational cannabis. I think this is one that has, I don't know what your feeling is. I think there's a good chance this could get done, but it's going to be difficult. It will pass by a slim margin if it passes.
Right, and did they just remove the homegrown part?
They did. So,
Now, do you think? Don't you think that they lose more votes removing that?
you know, and I'm not one of the bill's chief sponsors. I am a sponsor. I'm supportive of the legislation, but I'm not working intimately on the bill. But my understanding is that the idea of homegrown has been turned into a very political issue. It probably doesn't have a whole lot of merit, but nonetheless, there is a segment of legislators who are not willing to vote for it with the home grow provision. So home grow provision says that not only would you be able to purchase cannabis for recreational use legally and then would be regulated and taxed, but that you could grow a limited amount. Each homeowner could grow a limited amount for their own personal use. I believe that in every state that recreational cannabis has been approved, home grow has been a part of it. But the people that have opposition to this have concerns, and I'll put those in air quotes because it hasn't materialized in other states, but they have concerns that...
I mean, people, they brew their own beer at home.
Right. And they have concerns that people are going to use the home grow provision to set up a drug production and illegal drug production and sale operation. Which really, I don't know. I don't agree with that, but whatever. I think it's important that we pass it.
Let's be honest. People who are growing marijuana now do it now.
That's right.
Yeah, they do it now. You know, there's a store down from my old office called Brew and Grow. It's supposed to be for just growing hops, but I think they grow a little more than just the hops.
Yeah, and then this is, I think, the idea behind recreational cannabis, which, for the record, I am a supporter. I don't know if anybody knows that, but I believe that this is something that we ought to do for a number of reasons. Number one, it's become an enormous illegal industry that we spend an enormous amount of money on policing and or incarcerating people over, and yet we have decriminalized the possession of marijuana, but we still criminalize the sale of it. So it makes no sense, right? How is it okay to possess it, but it's not whoever's selling it to you, you can have it, but you can't buy it, right? So it's very odd, and so this is a way, like so many other states, California, Colorado, of course, Oregon, and then not surprised, Washington, and the biggest one, of course, is the entire country of Canada has now legalized recreational cannabis because they acknowledge that it's time to put this to bed, and let's regulate it, let's tax it, and that's what we're trying to do here in Illinois. So I'm a fan of it.
And we have the fifth item over there. Huh?
Yeah, it's going to be a big one, and this is something that I've heard from a lot of constituents about, is the Reproductive Health Act. Now, what I want to say is that I'm going to go into this in greater detail in another video, so I encourage you to watch, because there's quite a bit of detail in that would be its own...
And there's a lot of misinformation in that bill.
Tremendous amount of misinformation. I hear from people that it is going to allow, or it's going to require people who have a religious objection, require them to perform abortions, or hospitals, Catholic hospitals, to provide abortions. That's not true at all what it does. Really what it does, in its nutshell, is it treats abortion and it treats all of them exactly the same as any other healthcare law, right? So it removes the special laws that relate to abortion. It says that abortion is a healthcare decision, and it's going to be treated as every other healthcare decision. And I think it's created a lot of consternation, and a lot of people are very passionate about this issue, and I get that. There are people who are opposed to...
and the chief sponsor's been working very hard.
Very hard, and I think that this
Kelly Cassidy?
Yeah.
Representative Cassidy?
She has, and I like I said, I think that this is something that is going to get done, and I don't think it does what people think it does, and so we're going to do our best to educate you about what it is and what it's not. Most of the letters that I've received have been concerns about people being forced to do something beyond, and there's absolutely nothing in this law that does that. And the people that are promoting that are promoting a campaign of misinformation. If you're opposed to it, that's okay, but be opposed to it for factual reasons, not the nonsense. Right. Fix the void, right? So what
Kathy
legislative
Willis?
session would not be complete without some high-pressure bills
Absolutely.
like abortion and guns, right?
Abortion, guns.
And so Fix the Foidy's
Tax.
guns. Many of you might remember the Aurora shooting in Aurora, Illinois, where the person who was fired came in and killed a bunch of people with a gun.
As you shouldn't have had.
Shouldn't have had. And the reason he shouldn't have had it was he was convicted and the gun should have been taken away, but he still had his Illinois firearm owner's identification card. So this is about modernizing that law, bringing it up to speed and making it effective. I often hear from people, we don't need new laws, we need to enforce the ones we have in effect. But the ones we have in effect aren't working.
Right.
So this is a way of not adding in a new law, but taking the existing law, firearm owner's identification card, and giving it some teeth so it actually works. This has nothing to do with responsible gun owners. It's about making sure that people who are not supposed to have an FOID card
Right. It's a follow
don't have
through.
one. That's right.
Follow
That's right.
through.
Making sure it works. So there's a few other issues that are still out there, and I want to talk about these. This is, I think, something that's always on the mind of Chicagoans.
That's right.
You and I both represent a large number of. The elected school board. So once again, the bills for an elected school board for the Chicago Public Schools and for the city colleges of Chicago have passed the House of Representatives with overwhelming margins. The bill for a CPS elected school board passed 110 to 2. 110 to 2. Yeah. So not only does every resident of the city of Chicago think it's a good idea, or every representative of the city of Chicago, but 110 of the representatives out of 118 total in the state of Illinois think that this is a good idea.
And isn't Chicago one of the last?
It's the only
those,
school
right?
district in Illinois without an elected school board. And so it's something that I've been fighting for the last 5 years, and I know that you've been fighting alongside with me. It's something we're trying to provide. However, the bill is being currently stalled in the Senate because the mayor-elect, she's no longer the mayor-elect.
No.
Mayor Lightfoot has decided that she does not want this bill to proceed. She said that good news is she said she's still in support of a fully elected school board, which I'm happy to hear. Or I should say, she didn't say that. She said during the campaign that she was in support of a fully elected school board. She said she's still in support of an elected school board, but that she wants time to review this measure. Well, I hope that she spends some time. We only have a week left. She campaigned for about 1.5 years, and this bill has been, in its existing form, has been out there for over 5 years. So there's plenty of opportunities to review it, and I'm, of course, happy to discuss it with anybody, as I have for the last 5 years, to explain why it's a good idea, explain why the structure has been done in the way that it is, in order to address the problems. And really, the structure of the elected school board was designed to ensure that there was adequate representation from every minority and ethnic group and every demographic and every neighborhood in the city of Chicago, and to also to limit the influence of outside money so that the elections
And that's
are
why,
not bought up
that's
by...
why the number is higher than some people might like, but the number of school board members make sure we have the diversity, and if it's such a large district, then only money is going to be able to win that election.
Yeah, with 20 seats on the elected school board, they would be roughly the size of a state representative district, and that's still
But
still pretty
large.
big.
Yep.
You know, I'd say you'd be representing about 100,000 people. So we're still working on that. Another bill that has passed both chambers, but still going to come back to the House on concurrence. Something you were a big help with is a Student Data Privacy Act. This was an initiative of Raise Your Hand, so shout out to my friends at Raise Your Hand. They came to me 2 years ago with an idea to tighten up existing laws in order to ensure that data that's collected from students from using technology in schools, that parents had transparency over what data was being collected. They had notification if their children's data had been breached, and it gives them an opportunity to have ultimately some control over how that data is used, and if it needs to be deleted, gives them the ability to delete it. We would never deny parents control over anything else in their minor children's life. The idea that we shouldn't allow them the state access over data, which could be held and used for decades, I think is very important. So this is something that I feel really strongly about. I'm really glad it's going to get to the governor's desk, and hopefully we'll be able to shore up that law.
I'm glad to help. You know, as the chairman of Cybersecurity, Data Analytics, and IT Committee, you know, we worked along with the members to make sure that passes, and we'll have to do it because you have an amendment on it, right?
Yeah,
So
it
it's
was
going to come back to the committee.
Yeah, it was amended. I believe there were 7 amendments to the bill as we worked to find a solution that was workable, and I think that we found one. I think it's going to be a good bill, so I'm very happy about it. The last thing I want to talk about is retirement readiness, and retirement readiness is something that's been a passion of mine, right? Because one of the biggest problems that we have in our country is that there's so many people that are approaching retirement age and they're not ready.
Right.
They don't have the money saved up for their own retirement. 401ks have been an absolute disaster in across the United States, and the vast majority of people have not saved anywhere near what they need to save. And so I've done work on 2 fronts, right? One is I've worked very closely with our state treasurer on the Secure Choice Savings Program,
Right.
which allows people whose employers don't offer retirement programs to begin establishing IRA accounts through the state, having deductions taken out, pre-tax deductions, so that they can begin saving money through the state of Illinois. It's a great program. So we've done a little bit of tweaking. It was passed a couple years ago, so we did some tweaks to allow more people to participate in the program. There are people who live on our borders, people who live in Chicago, work in Indiana. So it allows
Right.
them to collect money from Indiana employers for deposits into retirement savings accounts or other states, and it allows the treasurer more flexibility to invest those funds. The other thing that I've done is with our public sector employees, because of the pension changes that we made that cut pension benefits so much when we passed Tier 2. Again, we have public sector employees that are relying on a pension, but that pension is not sufficient. And so we have deferred compensation. And one of the bills that I passed this year that's going to the governor's desk will allow, actually what it does is it's going to take new hires in state government and is going to automatically enroll them in a deferred compensation with an automatic deposit. So it gets them started early on saving their own money for retirement. Costs the state nothing, but
Is it voluntarily or is it automatic?
it's automatic, but it's voluntary, so they can opt out. But the idea is let's get them started early, get them saving money, because if they're well saved for their retirement, then they will be self-sufficient in their retirement. The worst thing that we can do as a state is cut pension benefits and then say we're actually saving the state money when all we're doing is pushing those people onto public aid when they retire, right? And so this is a way of stopping that problem from happening by ensuring that they save for retirement. So those are a couple of things that I've worked on, a couple of bills that I'm pretty happy about. I do want to talk a little bit more in depth, and then we'll finish up here. I'd like to talk about the fair tax, because this is a big issue, and I think
the votes are coming along. I think we're very, 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 very close.
Yeah, I think we'll have a vote next week, and I feel strongly that this will happen. And remember, I think this is real important for people to know. We're not voting to impose a fair tax. We don't have the ability to impose a fair tax. All we're doing, and every representative who votes for this, is saying that we believe that you, the citizens of the state of Illinois, the voters of the state of Illinois, should have the opportunity to weigh in on whether or not we stick with a flat tax, which really hasn't worked for us well, or we impose a fair flat tax. And so that will be the referendum, and you will have to decide. And it's important that you
in the
decide
general
on the
election,
facts.
right?
That's right.
In the general.
And so that fair tax, what it would do is it would allow, instead of a flat tax, where everyone pays the exact same tax rate, instead of everyone paying, instead of poor and middle class and working class people paying the same rate as the wealthiest in our state, a fair tax allows for lower taxes on lower incomes. And that's exactly what this proposal does. And just so that you understand, this is the same, 32 other states have a fair tax. The District of Columbia has a fair tax, and of course the federal government has a fair tax, graduated rate structure. And so it does a number of really good things, and I've got them listed right up here on the chart here. It eliminates the structural deficit, and that's so important. All of our financial problems, Representative, in Illinois come from the fact that we're unable to manage our debts.
Right. And the interest that we pay on that debt is it eats away at everything.
Yes, and it keeps putting pressure, upward pressure, on the need for more and more tax increases. As the debt grows and we don't address it, we need higher and higher tax increases. And that makes no sense. But when you eliminate the structural deficit, which the fair tax will allow us to do, you don't accumulate more debt, you begin paying down debt, and you put yourself in a position where not only do you not have to raise taxes, but you put yourself in a position where, in time, you'll be able to lower taxes. You'll be able to pay for a tax decrease responsibly. One of the things that is so interesting about this proposal, and the rate structure has been proposed, is that compared to our current system, this would actually be a tax cut for 97% of the people living in Illinois. So if you make $250,000 a year or less, and that's net income, not gross income, not total income, but what you report to the state, $250,000 a year or less, you're going to pay less taxes under this proposal. But yet we'll still be able to solve our financial problems. So it's much needed middle class, working class tax relief, right? It's tax relief for the people that have been so overburdened by an unfair system. It creates a little fairness, hence fair tax. And you know, like I said, it helps us pay our debts, it helps us fund education properly, and that's so important too, because one of the biggest problems in Illinois is this huge property tax problem we have, right? And so by making sure that we live up to our commitments to increase funding for education, we relieve that pressure on property taxes and we give people property tax relief. There is property tax relief baked into this bill, but the most important property tax relief will come when we live up to our commitment to fund education.
Because our property tax bill, I think, is almost like over 50%.
Yeah, so in
50,
Chicago
52%.
it's 55%,
55%
goes to education, but statewide it's higher, it's closer to 70 because the suburbs pay so much more towards education than we do.
I didn't realize it's like 70% for the rest of the state.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it for what's going on in Springfield. Now, like I said, we talked about those other issues, and I'm going to do follow-up videos that kind of go more in depth about what's going on with gaming, what's going on with cannabis, fix the void. I'm going to talk a great deal about the
Health.
Yeah, the Reproductive Health Act, because I think that's very important that people are aware of what we're voting on. And then I'm going to go into greater detail on the fair tax and why we do this. There are a lot of things that are being said out there against this fair tax that are not true. It's been called a middle class tax increase. It's not.
It's not.
It's a middle class tax cut and a working class tax cut and a poor tax cut. So there's a lot of misinformation going on out there about this, and I want to clear up some of that. I want to talk about cuts to government. I want to talk about other options. I want to talk about where we're going in the state and how the fair tax is a really good solution forward. But that will come up in future things. So, as always, if people have comments or questions or concerns, please leave them here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, or you can put a question here on this or a comment here, and I'll respond to those. Or you can always reach out to my office, although, to be fair, I'm giving the staff a break for the holiday weekend, so we probably won't get back to you right away, but call, make an appointment. I'll see you over the summer. 773-286-1115 is my office. Please feel free to call, talk to Judy or JC. They'll be happy to talk with you. Other than that, anything.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for having me in this wonderful little studio that we have here in Springfield, so we can talk about this. I just want to say thank you for watching. A wonderful holiday weekend, and I have to take a moment to wish happy birthday to one of the most important people in my life. She always was the most important person until my son arrived. Now she's 1A or whatever. So to my beautiful wife and wonderful wife Sharon, thank you for all of your support, letting me do this, come down here and work on behalf of our friends and neighbors and relatives down here in Springfield. It's such important work, and I'm so honored to do it, and I couldn't do it without your support. I love you very much. Happy birthday to you, and thank you everyone for watching.
Happy birthday, Sharon.
Yeah, thank you, and check in. This next week we'll be doing a lot of videos, keeping up to date on all the other issues. So thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.